Commander Elias Voss stood at the threshold of the celestial throne, a fortress of shifting crystal and living metal. The Xel'Thari palace loomed above him, its translucent walls pulsing with faint iridescence, as if the structure itself was breathing. Two towering guards, their elongated frames clad in obsidian armor, flanked him. Their spears, tipped with energy blades, hovered just inches from his chest, a silent reminder that he was neither trusted nor welcome. "You will not speak unless spoken to," one of them said, his voice unnervingly smooth. Elias ignored him. He had been in enemy territory before, but never this deep. The Xel'Tharians were elusive, their empire ancient and enigmatic. Humanity's few encounters with them had been tense at best. And now, for reasons beyond him, their princess had summoned him personally. The great doors ahead shuddered apart, revealing a vast hall bathed in silver light. At the far end, on an elevated dais, sat Princess Soraya. She was unlike anything Elias had expected. Tall, with a willowy frame and violet gold eyes that seemed to shift like nebulae, she radiated an aura of quiet command. Her gown, woven from something that shimmered between fabric and liquid, draped effortlessly over her. A crystalline crown hovered just above her head, held in place by unseen forces. Elias strode forward, his boots echoing against the polished obsidian floor. The silence in the chamber felt oppressive, dozens of alien dignitaries watching from shadowed alcoves, their unreadable expressions masked in gold filigree. He stopped at the base of the dais, meeting Soraya's gaze. "I don't like games," he said flatly. "Why am I here?" A whisper of movement passed through the chamber. A human, speaking so bluntly to her, was unheard of. Soraya, however, smiled. "Direct. I expected no less." She rose gracefully, descending the steps toward him. The scent of something unfamiliar, spiced, yet cool like ozone, drifted from her as she stopped mere inches away. "I summoned you," she said, voice low enough that only he could hear, "because the fate of both our people depends on it." Elias kept his expression neutral. "You're going to have to be more specific." Soraya tilted her head slightly, as if weighing her words. Then, with a flick of her fingers, the room darkened. A holographic display materialized between them, a cluster of star systems, planets blinking red, lines of intercepted transmission scrolling in alien script. "These messages," she said, "were supposedly sent by your people. They contain threats against my empire." Elias frowned. "Supposedly? They are forgeries." A murmur swept through the onlookers. Even her own court had not known this. Soraya turned away from him, walking slowly as the display flickered, zooming in on a particular message. A human voice crackled through the chamber. "Xel'Thari will burn. Prepare your dead." Elias exhaled sharply. "That's not ours." "No, it is not." Soraya faced him again. "But it was designed to look like it. And within days, it will be used as justification for war." Elias felt a slow, creeping cold settle in his chest. "Who's behind it?" Soraya's expression darkened. "That is what I need you to help me uncover." A cynical laugh almost escaped him. "You think the Terran government would listen to me? I'm a soldier. They keep me in the dark as much as they do you." She studied him for a long moment. Then, softly, she said, "You are not here to speak to them. You are here because you can survive what's coming." Before he could ask what that meant, a chime rang through the air, sharp, urgent. The guards stiffened. Soraya's fingers twitched at her side. The hologram vanished. The great doors behind Elias slammed shut. Soraya turned to her nearest guard. "What is it?" The warrior hesitated, then spoke in rapid Xel'Tharian. Elias didn't understand the words, but he understood fear. Soraya's expression hardened. She turned back to him. "They know you're here." Elias's muscles tensed. "Who?" A sound like shattering glass split the air. The far wall imploded, a shock wave of force tearing through the chamber. Shards of crystalline structure rained down as figures clad in sleek black armor poured through the breach, weapons humming. Elias moved before thinking. He grabbed Soraya and yanked her behind him as the first shot rang out. A plasma round burned past his ear, searing the air. The princess's guards were already engaged in combat, blades clashing against high-tech weaponry. The assailants moved with military precision, no hesitation, no wasted movement. Trained assassins. Soraya pulled free from his grip, her hands moving in an intricate pattern. A shockwave of energy burst outward from her, sending two attackers hurtling backward. Elias grabbed a fallen guard's sidearm and dropped to one knee, firing twice. The first shot missed. The second found its mark, one assassin crumpled, his armor smoking. More were coming. Too many. Soraya turned to him, her eyes flashing. We need to go. Now. Elias didn't argue. He pivoted, ducking low as another shot scorched past his shoulder. They sprinted toward a side passage as alarms blared through the palace. Soraya raised a hand, and the crystalline wall ahead of them melted away, revealing a hidden corridor. In here, she commanded. Elias dove in after her just as more gunfire erupted behind them. The passage sealed shut, cutting off pursuit. For a moment, only the sound of their ragged breathing filled the narrow space. Then Elias turned to her. That, he said, was not a random attack. Soraya nodded, her expression unreadable. No. It wasn't. Elias exhaled, gripping the stolen weapon tighter. You were about to tell me who's behind the forged transmissions. Soraya hesitated. Then, finally, she whispered, High Chancellor Drezek. The name sent a chill down his spine. He had read the intelligence reports. The man was more than just a politician, he was a strategist, a puppet master. And if he was involved, things were far worse than Elias had imagined. Soraya met his gaze. The war has already begun, Commander. A distant explosion rocked the palace. Dust trickled from the ceiling. Elias checked the charge on his stolen weapon and squared his shoulders. Then we'd better stop it. The corridor trembled as another explosion rocked the palace. Dust swirled in the dim light, catching in Elias's throat. He pressed forward, weapon at the ready, scanning the passage ahead. The walls, though smooth and crystalline, pulsed faintly with an organic glow, alive, in some strange way. Soraya moved swiftly beside him, her steps light despite the urgency in her gaze. This passage leads to the Undercity, she said. It's not safe here. Elias smirked grimly. You think? Soraya ignored the sarcasm. She lifted her hand, and the wall beside them peeled open like a blossoming flower, revealing a descending stairway. Hurry. They rushed down, the sounds of distant fighting growing muffled. The temperature dropped as they entered a cavernous space beneath the palace, a hidden transit hub. Sleek transport pods lined the platform, their surfaces reflecting dim blue light. The area was deserted. Soraya approached a control panel, her fingers moving over the holographic interface. We need to get to Sector 7. There's someone who can help us. Elias kept his eyes on the tunnel entrance. Who? A scientist. A former Xel'Thari intelligence officer. She hesitated. He defected years ago when he uncovered something he wasn't meant to. Elias's grip tightened on his weapon. And now he's our only shot at proving this war is a setup. Soraya nodded. If we make it to him in time. A faint hum signaled the pod's activation. The doors slid open, revealing a sleek interior. Elias stepped in first, scanning the space before motioning for Soraya to follow. She entered, and the doors sealed shut behind her. With a jolt, the pod shot forward into the underground tunnels. For a brief moment, silence settled between them, broken only by the faint hum of the transport system. Elias leaned back against the cool metal wall, studying Soraya. You knew this attack was coming, didn't you? She exhaled, her shoulders tensing. I suspected. But I didn't think they would act this fast. Elias scoffed. They waited until you brought a human into your palace. Now they can spin this however they want. Her gaze met his. Which is why we have to stop them before they do. Before Elias could respond, the pod lurched, throwing them off balance. The lights flickered. A warning chime blared through the cabin. Tell me that was turbulence, Elias muttered. Soraya's fingers moved over the console, her face tightening. We've been intercepted. A voice crackled through the comm system, sharp and authoritative. Transport 07, you are in violation of emergency lockdown protocol. Prepare to be boarded. Elias didn't hesitate. He snapped his weapon up. They're not here to negotiate. Soraya's jaw clenched. No, they're not. The pod shuddered as magnetic clamps locked onto its exterior. A hiss of pressurized air signaled the docking sequence. Within seconds, the far door began to open. Elias moved fast. He grabbed Soraya and pulled her behind the nearest control panel for cover. His weapon was already raised when the first soldier stepped through, a Xel'Thari enforcer in midnight armor, his rifle sweeping the cabin. Elias fired twice. The first shot hit the soldier's shoulder, staggering him. The second punched through his helmet, dropping him instantly. More poured in. Soraya ducked low, her fingers tracing intricate patterns in the air. The ship groaned as the gravity inside the cabin shifted. The enforcers stumbled, their balance thrown off. Elias took advantage. He pushed forward, firing with precise, controlled bursts. The confined space gave him the edge. Xel'Thari soldiers were trained for open battlefield tactics, not close-quarters combat. 2 more went down before the rest retreated. The pod shook violently as they detached, leaving Elias and Soraya hurtling through the tunnels at breakneck speed. Soraya slammed her palm against the emergency override, redirecting power. The pod stabilized, but barely. That was close, Elias muttered, breathing hard. Soraya shot him a wry look. We're not safe yet. The transport pod finally slowed, arriving at an abandoned station deep beneath the capital. The doors hissed open to reveal a sprawling underground district, Sector 7. Unlike the pristine palace above, this place was a labyrinth of neon-lit streets, towering industrial structures, and a constant haze of smoke. It was where the Empire's outcasts and dissidents disappeared. Elias stepped out first, scanning the area. Where's your contact? Soraya motioned toward a narrow alley. This way. They moved quickly, weaving through dimly lit corridors until they reached a rundown building covered in alien script. Soraya pressed her palm against a scanner. The door slid open with a mechanical hiss. Inside, the air smelled of oil and old circuits. Various devices and monitors cluttered the space, their screens displaying streams of data in shifting Xel'Thari code. A figure stood in the center of the room, a Xel'Thari male, older, with sharp, tired eyes. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Princess," he said. "You brought a human." Soraya stepped forward. "Draven, we don't have time for formalities." Elias crossed his arms. "She says you have proof the war's a setup." Draven studied him for a moment before gesturing to a nearby console. With a few keystrokes, a holographic feed filled the room. Lines of intercepted transmissions scrolled rapidly. "This," Draven said, pointing to a highlighted section, "is a communication from High Chancellor Drezik's personal security network. It was sent 2 weeks ago, before any of these human threats even surfaced." Elias read the message. His stomach tightened. It was a detailed directive outlining a covert operation to fabricate human aggression against Xel'Thari. The attacks, the transmissions, it was all orchestrated. They needed a reason, Draven murmured. And now they have one. Soraya's fists clenched. "They're moving faster than I thought." Elias turned to her. "We need to broadcast this." Draven shook his head. "Impossible. The network is locked. The only way to expose this is from inside the Central Authority's mainframe, deep in Drezik's compound." Elias exhaled sharply. "Of course it is. Soraya met his gaze. Then we go there. Draven hesitated. That's suicide. Elias checked his weapon. Not if we do it right. Soraya nodded. We'll need a plan. Before anyone could respond, a distant alarm began blaring through the city. Draven's eyes widened. They've tracked you. Elias cursed. We have to move. Now. Soraya turned to him, her expression firm. Then let's end this before it begins. With that, they vanished into the chaos of Sector 7, toward the heart of enemy territory. Elias moved fast, keeping his weapon close as he and Soraya navigated the back alleys of Sector 7. The neon-lit streets pulsed with the hum of distant sirens. High Chancellor Drezik's forces were closing in. They had minutes, maybe less, before the city was locked down. Draven led the way through a maze of industrial corridors. The Central Authority's mainframe is inside Drezik's security complex, he said. Fortified, heavily guarded, and accessible only through an encrypted system. Even if you make it inside, you'll need clearance codes. Soraya's voice was calm, but firm. Then we find someone who has them. Draven stopped at a concealed hatch in the side of a rusted building. He pried it open, revealing a small passage. This leads to the maintenance tunnels beneath the complex. It's your best chance to get inside unnoticed. Elias eyed the dark, narrow space. Great. Tight spaces and a high chance of getting shot. Soraya stepped past him, her expression unreadable. You're welcome to stay behind. He smirked. Not a chance. They climbed inside, the hatch sealing behind them. The tunnel was cramped, damp, and filled with the scent of metal and stagnant air. They moved quickly, footsteps muffled against the grated floor. Soraya whispered, once we're inside, we'll need to split up. I'll access the mainframe. You cover me. Elias didn't like it. Bad idea. If something goes wrong. It won't. He exhaled sharply. That's not how plans work. Soraya's violet gold eyes met his in the dim light. It's the only way. They pressed on, reaching a service hatch marked with Cypherian script. Draven entered a code into a small panel. The hatch hissed open, revealing a dimly lit security corridor. This is where I leave you, Draven said. Once you step inside, you're on your own. Elias nodded. Appreciate the help. Soraya placed a hand on Draven's shoulder. If we fail, get this data to someone who can use it. Draven hesitated, then nodded. Good luck. Elias and Soraya slipped into the corridor as the hatch sealed behind them. The complex was eerily quiet. Sleek walls lined with security panels stretched in both directions. They moved fast, ducking into cover as a pair of guards passed. Elias spotted a high-ranking officer among them, his uniform marked with an insignia of authority. Perfect. As the guards rounded the corner, Elias moved. He grabbed the officer from behind, dragging him into the shadows before he could make a sound. Soraya placed a hand against the man's temple. A faint glow flickered around her fingers. The officer's breathing slowed, his pupils dilating. Codes, she whispered. The man's voice was distant, almost mechanical. Alpha sequence, Delta 275. Soraya nodded and pressed her fingers against his forehead. The officer's body slumped unconscious. Elias raised an eyebrow. I don't know if I should be impressed or terrified. She smirked. Both. With the codes secured, they moved deeper into the complex, reaching a vaulted chamber filled with massive data conduits. The mainframe sat at the center, a pulsating construct of shifting energy and metal. Soraya approached the console. I'll handle the upload. Watch the door. Elias positioned himself near the entrance, weapon ready. His pulse was steady, but he knew this was the moment everything could go wrong. Soraya's fingers danced over the holographic interface. Lines of data streamed past her, transferring the evidence of Drezik's conspiracy into the system. A voice crackled over the speakers. Unauthorized access detected. Lockdown initiated. Elias cursed. We're out of time. The doors slammed shut just as alarms blared through the facility. Red warning lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. Soraya didn't stop. Almost there. Elias raised his weapon as the first wave of soldiers stormed in. He fired, dropping 2 before they could react. The others spread out, using the massive data conduits for cover. Plasma rounds scorched past him, forcing him to duck. He rolled behind a pillar, returning fire. The air smelled of burning circuitry as the battle intensified. Soraya's voice was urgent. Elias. He turned, just in time to see a guard lunging at her. Elias moved without thinking. He fired once, hitting the soldier in the chest. Soraya didn't flinch. Her hands moved faster over the interface. Uploading now. Elias gritted his teeth, reloading as another group of enforcers closed in. He took down 3, but more were coming. Soraya exhaled sharply. Done. The mainframe pulsed as the transmission completed. The data was out, broadcasted across the Xel'Thari network. Every high-ranking official, every military commander, they all had the proof now. Elias turned to Soraya. Now what? She lifted a hand. The air shimmered, and a shockwave burst outward. The remaining soldiers were thrown back, crashing into the walls. Elias whistled. You could have done that earlier. She smirked. I was busy. The alarms continued to blare. Reinforcements would be coming. They had to move. Soraya tapped into the interface one last time. I'm setting the mainframe to wipe Drezik's classified files. He won't be able to cover this up. Elias nodded. Then let's get the hell out. They sprinted toward an emergency exit, dodging debris as the facility shook. The mainframe's collapse was triggering self-destruct protocols. The outer doors blew open, revealing the city skyline. A transport vessel hovered just beyond the platform. Draven stood at the open hatch, waving them forward. Elias and Soraya ran. The ground shook violently as explosions ripped through the complex. Fire and smoke erupted behind them. Elias leapt onto the vessel first, turning to pull Soraya in just as the shockwave hit. The transport lurched away, engines roaring. Below them, the complex collapsed, vanishing into a sea of flames. Inside the transport, Elias finally let out a breath. He turned to Soraya. We did it. She met his gaze, something unreadable in her expression. For now. Draven's voice crackled over the comms. You both just changed the course of history. Elias exhaled. Let's hope it was worth it. The transport shot toward the stars, leaving the burning city behind. The war had been stopped before it began. But something told Elias this wasn't over. Not by a long shot.